So what we want to talk about is Mindful Self-Compassion, which is a program that we're going to start teaching in the fall. It's an 8-week program meeting once a week, and we haven't gotten yet where the venue is and the exact dates, but we wanted to give people an overview of that, and some of the information that we give can be helpful even without the class, but the class gives a more intensive view of what this is all about, mindful self-compassion. And so we'll describe a little bit of that, and then I will do a meditation at the end. Mindfulness is oftentimes viewed as meditation, and this differs a little bit from MBSR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction, in that they focus mostly on the mindfulness or the meditation. And this program, the main focus is on the self-compassion. So we'll just start with a little description of what mindful self-compassion is, what it's not, and then towards the end of our time, we will do the meditation, and then later, I guess, if there are any questions, we can go over that. So.
Okay, so what exactly is a mindful self-compassion? And, you know, first, it's to have compassion for others. It's easy for us to have compassion for others. And the difficult thing is to have compassion for yourself. And that is really, really the real objective here is to quiet the critical voice and quiet the critical parent, or wherever that critical voice is, and just learn to take self-compassion to yourself. And just fill in over here while I'm...
Okay. So oftentimes there's confusion about self-compassion in terms of confusing it with self-pity, self-indulgence, even self-esteem. The difference between self-pity and self-compassion is that with self-pity we tend to be immersed in our own problems, and one of the core components of this mindful self-compassion is common humanity. So when we are focused only on our problems and not seeing the connection that we have with others, then we get wrapped up in that and we lose that sense of being connected with other people. So that's the way that self-compassion differs from self-pity. It's also very different from self-indulgence. You know, oftentimes people think if we decide that we're going to be okay with wherever we are in any given moment, then we're just going to let ourselves do whatever it is that we want. You know, I've had a bad day at the office, so I'm going to come back and eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's. You know, that feels very compassionate in the moment, but self-compassion means long-term. You know, what's in our best interest long-term. So while one night of eating a pint of Ben & Jerry's on the couch isn't going to hurt us, if we get into the habit of just indulging ourselves, then that's not self-compassion because it's not good for us long-term.
And that could also be used for like self-medication. So for whatever, you know, I have had a bad day. It's 90+ degrees. I just totally need to like numb out. So whatever narcotic is available or whatever alcohol is available, let's just kind of shut down for a while because I really need that. And that would be good to myself. But is the long-term benefit in there? Of course it's not. So if you're self-compassionate, you're thinking about the long-term benefit.
So another thing that gets confused with self-compassion is self-esteem. And while everybody agrees that self-esteem is a good thing, the difference here is that self-esteem comes often from comparing ourselves to others. And, you know, I'm better than this person, so I feel good about myself. And as Richard likes to say, it's a moving target. You know, one day we'll have a good day and we feel really good about ourselves. The next day everything goes wrong and we feel really bad about ourselves, and that critical voice comes out. So self-compassion says that we are okay with ourselves wherever we are and whatever happens in the course of the day. It means that if we're having a bad day and we're feeling bad about something, then we can be okay with ourselves there. We can say to ourselves, this is a moment of suffering, this is really difficult for me. It's not excusing bad behavior, but it's just acknowledging that we are, like everybody, imperfect, and we do the best that we can. The danger comes with that, you know, critical voice, because that message gets heard by the brain, and then we start believing that we're not good enough, we can't do this, we can't do that. So that's those are the ways that they differ, that self-compassion differs from all those entities, from self-pity, self-indulgence, and self-esteem.
So we're trying to like just give you an overview of this, and you know, once we do the program, there's numerous studies that show the lasting effect of self-compassion as compared to someone who's self-critical. I mean, you just ask yourself this: who would you rather take a long trip with, someone who's self-compassionate or someone who's critical? I mean, that trip suddenly becomes very, very long after a while. We've all experienced that at one time or another. And so there's three components of self-compassion. And one is self-kindness, and two, we're part of the common humanity, and three is mindfulness. So I just want to do a little experiment here, and then I'll go into this a little bit more. Take your hands and squeeze your hands. I mean, really, everybody squeeze the hands and kind of hang out here. Now, I know what you're immediately going to be feeling. You're going to be feeling the fingernails into the palms of your hand. So, but I want to know, what exactly are you feeling emotionally while you're doing this? And you could just pop it out. You just tell me. I mean, I'm feeling frustrated. Anxious. Anger, of course, yeah, okay.
Powerful.
Powerful. All right, okay. I guess if we're putting our hands against, you know, the establishment, but anger, frustrated. Questioning, okay, yeah.
Why are we doing this?
All right, okay. Now just open the hands. Just let your hands open up. Just kind of, what do you feel?
Relief.
Relief.
Attention.
You're being with what is. What is. And there isn't that resistance. There isn't that resistance. So once you let go of that resistance, it becomes part of stepping into mindfulness.
No judgment.
No
Just
judgments.
being there.
So that moment of that we all felt is stepping into no judgment. It's stepping into mindfulness. And not to worry, instinctively we'll suddenly get like this again. And then after practice, we learn to be at ease with what is. And that's the real trick. Now just take your hands straight out. Lift your arms right out. Just kind of hang out here for a while. And what do you feel now?
Open.
I feel part of the community right here. I feel part of this
Mm-hmm.
community that I'm with right now. Anybody else?
Supplication. Supplication.
Supplication.
Relief, but I don't have to hold it.
Yeah, well, you kind of open, And so this is an example of a metaphor, a feeling of what it feels like to be part of common humanity. Common humanity. And that's a big thing. Because common humanity tells us that, look around, none of us are perfect. None of us are perfect.
And yet we all are.
And yet we all are in our own way. And so the idea about that harsh judgment, you know, people that realize, hey, I'm part of humanity, and all part of this whole life experience is, you know, just part of it. And that we stumble and we fall and we pick up, etc., etc. That's just part of it. So we take that harsh voice away. Like, oh, you're so stupid. didn't you know better? You know, I told you so. I mean, all the negatives that you hear. So by letting go of that, you just open yourself up and you realize you're kinder to yourself. That's the first step of being kind to yourself. And again, you know, there's all kinds of studies that affirm that people that have self-compassion rebound much better than those that have that critical voice. They just rebound quicker. Okay, so here's the last one. Take your hands right to your heart. Take your right hand to your heart, and then your left hand over your right hand. Now what do you feel here? Warmth. Okay.
Peace.
Yeah. Touch. You know, this is self-compassion. Well, this is simple. It's just all very, very simple. And yet it's very complicated. This is what we're talking about, to have self-compassion. And to bring it to yourself. And this is not, woe is me, I'm so pitiful, or why me, and none of that. This is just self-compassion. Yeah, atta girl. Right. Right. It's not being self-absorbed. And that's it. So, do I need to go through that?
No, you did. You went through that.
Okay.
So, the last, you know, one of the things that we do as part of this program and the training, you know, is we use that touch, and we'll use it when I do the meditation. That's part of it. Because what happens is it triggers the brain to make that connection with, you know, feeling compassion for ourselves in a tough situation, so that if something arises, oftentimes what it takes is just hand on heart. We use that expression a lot in this program, hand on heart. So you'll see people in the course of these workshops where somebody will talk about something that's really opening them up, you know, being very vulnerable, and people's hands will go there automatically. So what we're saying is that we can do that for ourselves. We can do that easily for somebody else. It's, you know, it's easy for us to generate compassion for others, but it's much harder sometimes because, again, we view it as self-indulgent or self-pitying, so it's important to get clear on those differences. One of the, some of the benefits of mindfulness and self-compassion have been pretty well borne out by research. So part of it is positive brain changes. Things happen in the brain when we use meditation, especially with that self-compassion component, that change the way the brain operates. It changes it physiologically so that the amygdala, which is our fight, flight, or freeze center, is not so reactive. It's suppressed to the point that it, you know, the fight, flight, or freeze was incorporated into us to help us evolve because threats were always out there. But it's not meant to be something that we feel constantly. The problem is that the threats that we feel today are threats to our self-image, our self-concept. They're not real physical threats, and yet the brain reacts as if they are. And so this practice allows the brain to kind of settle down with that.
That's the reptilian.
Yeah,
Brain,
it's the
that's
old
that you're
part
feeling.
of the
That's
brain. So another system that's triggered is, you know, we think about when you have a baby and the way you treat your baby with that touch. And so that system is triggered by warmth, soothing touch, and gentle vocalizations. So we think about that. It's easy to think about that in terms of when we see a baby. You know, we want to embrace them and keep them warm. We touch them gently, and then we make those noises to babies. You know, we don't have to say any words. We're not, but we're still communicating. And those are the same kind of vocalizations and warmth and soothing touch, the hand on heart, that triggers that in our own brain. So we can learn to self-soothe. And that's what this is all about, is just training the brain to learn how to soothe ourselves. So that when we're faced with a situation of stress, you know, we can do the hand on heart and the brain automatically gets triggered. Okay, this is a moment of suffering, but everything is going to be okay. This is really difficult, but through it all, I'm going to be okay. Another thing that happens is the motivation. You know, people think that being critical is going to motivate us to do better, and to a certain degree it does. There's kind of a point where it starts backfiring on us, though. What we've learned is that when you're critical with yourself to try to motivate yourself, you keep telling yourself things like, you know, what's wrong with you? Can't you do any better than that? You know, you're no good, you can't do anything right. Well, the brain hears those messages. And what happens if we tell ourselves or tell anybody that you can't do this, you're not good enough to do this, then we stop trying. The difference with self-compassion is that people are more resilient, which means that if we have a failure, we pick ourselves up and we try it again, because it's not the end of the world. It's that common humanity. We all go through that. And we also tend to persevere longer if we have that background of self-compassion. So we don't give up because we're not telling ourselves, you can't do this, so why bother? We just say, well, it didn't work that time, but let me see what can happen the next time. So those are all areas that, you know, change the way the brain works and perceives things, so changes our behavior and changes the ease with which we go through our lives.
You're not sending a negative message to the brain. And just, you know, go back and find your own critical teacher or your own critical parent and see if you still hear that voice echoing, no matter how many years goes by. And so the trick is you know, that negative voice is to change it. And this is where the neural pathways come in and how we can change it. And it's not easy. It's just not easy. It's like going back to the gym, only in a compassionate way. And changing, very skillfully changing those neural pathways. Is this going to be the meditation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what the time frame is.
How are we doing on time?
Still have a half hour.
Oh, that's
How much time?
Till about 11.
11 o'clock.
okay.
11 o'clock? Well, then I can tell you about my third grade teacher.
She didn't like boys.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, it really is interesting. I still remember this very, very clearly. You know, I went to a small Catholic school, and it was ring the bell, actually. It was in the city of Buffalo, and then I went to a public school in the middle of the year. And I just remember I was in third grade, and there was a teacher's name was Miss Carberry. I still remember her very clearly. And the question was, it was math. Johnny went to the store with $1 to buy a quart of milk and a pack of cigarettes and a loaf of bread, or whatever it was. How much change did Johnny come back with?
How long ago was this?
Yeah, and he came back with change, right? And so I remember just skillfully writing that down. Johnny went to the store, $1. I was so careful about this penmanship. I was new in the class. Milk, bread, this. And I raised my hand, and I was the first one up there. And I just handed it to the teacher, and she looked at me and said, "Of all the colossal gall." Now, one, I never heard of colossal, and I never heard of gall. But I knew that they weren't good things to say to me. And I totally shrunk. I mean, I just, you know, it was a thing that, like, oh my God. And that little critical teacher, at that moment, you know, sometimes I could, for a while, I would still hear that voice. So you ask your question. I mean, was it your coach, was it your uncle, your parent, your teacher, whatever? Do we still hear that critical voice reappearing in a different way? And so what can we do about that critical voice? And I mean, that's, you know, I use that as an example, but not that we're all sitting here feeling sorry for ourselves, but there's just another way.
One of the things that I found really helpful in doing this training was an exercise that we did about the critical voice. And you know, it's easy when we start recognizing that that critical voice is there to then get upset with that. And that's not self-compassion either. So the exercise was, what is the goal of the critical voice? And oftentimes the goal is not a bad goal. You know, the goal is, we want you to do better. You know, we want you to, you know, live a good life. We want you to have more. And so in that way, even looking at the critical voice from a compassionate standpoint takes a lot of the sting out of it. I think that's the thing where people often get caught up in, when I start teaching mindful self-compassion to clients, you know, they embrace the whole idea, and then oftentimes they'll come in and they'll say, well, I know I should be doing these meditations, I should be doing these exercises, but I'm not doing it. And so we have to stop then and look at, you know, how are you talking to yourself about this? If you're not doing it, rather than just berate yourself for not doing it, let's look at why you're not doing it. You know, what's the fear behind that? What's the concern behind that? And in every instance, just work really hard to view it from a compassionate point of view. And it isn't easy because it's a habit pattern that we all develop. The way our brain works is we are born with a negativity bias. That means we look for the problems. And that made a lot of sense as we were evolving, to look for the problems, because the people who didn't look for the problems didn't survive. So there had to be something set up so that people could survive. And here we are. And unfortunately, that part of the brain is still working overtime, and it's not survival anymore. It's just, as I said earlier, it's a threat to our self-concept, not a threat to our lives. But the brain still acts as if it's a threat to our lives.
Is there an example of, for example, a negative feeling will last in the brain for a minute and
90 seconds.
90 seconds. Okay, so an insult could happen to you, or you could hear something, and for 90 seconds it triggers something right to the brain, and you feel it. And for 90 days, you could hear it.
Because we keep feeding the bear. We keep it going, we keep it alive. But physiologically, that reaction only lasts for a minute and a half. But in our mind, we keep it alive for much, much longer. I mean, I'm sure we've all met people who carry resentments for years, people who don't speak to a relative for years because they're angry at them for some such, they don't even remember why. So we can keep those feelings going, but physiologically, they only happen for a minute and a half. But we're trying to overcome a lot of things, because another thing that happens with the brain is that we tend to think negative thoughts 3 to 4 times more often than we think positive thoughts. And so, you know, it's just, we're working against the way the brain normally works, because the brain isn't beneficial at this point in our evolution. It's just that old brain. So that's why having the compassion through this process is really important, because it's not going to be easy. It's going to be, what I started realizing was I was noticing sooner when I was going down that road, when I was starting to think in a negative way about myself or even about somebody else. So if I can notice it sooner, I can stop it sooner.
Yeah, when I mentioned, you know, when I mentioned this too, like I work at a drug rehab place, and I hear easier said than done, and that is true. It is easier said than done, because you have to reprogram how you think. And you know, like Mary Ellen mentioned, we wouldn't be here today if we didn't have those negative thoughts, because we had to be constantly vigilant I mean, we're blessed to where, for the most part, our lives are safe. So, so then these negative thoughts suddenly go to like emotional thoughts. And they start to feel that negative emotions. And then this is all part of the program of just learning to, it's like going to the gym for the brain, only in a compassionate way, and reprogramming how we're thinking.
So I was going to read a little poem. That's also part of this program. Is they really incorporate a lot of poetry into it, and this is a poem called "Kindness" by Naomi Nye, and I'll read this, and then we can do the meditation. So this kind of just gives a sense of maybe how difficult it is to find that, you know, what you have to go through to get to where you can recognize this kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say it is I you have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. Yeah, we could.
It's okay if we, for the meditation, just dim the lights. Okay, so, you know, part of the meditation is to fall awake and not fall asleep. Okay, move the computer a second. Get a little light, okay? All right, so just let your eyes soften. Find a posture that your body is comfortable. Then let your eyes just gently close. They could partially close or fully. And take a few slow, easy breaths. Releasing any unnecessary tension in your body. So maybe the exhale's just a little bit longer than the inhale. Just begin to feel the belly rise and fall. Feel the breath lengthen. Almost as if it's on a velvet type of string or rope, or just back and forth. And if you like, you could place your hand over your heart. Or any soothing place that reminds you that we're bringing not only awareness, but an affectionate awareness to our breath and to ourself. Now slowly begin to notice your breathing in your body. Feeling your body breathe in and feeling your body breathe out. Just letting your body breathe you. There is nothing you really need to do. Now notice the rhythm of your breathing. Flowing in, flowing out. Feel the natural rhythm of your breathing. It's oceanic. Ebb and flow, ebb and flow. Your mind will naturally wander like a curious child or maybe a little puppy. And when this is happening, just gently return to the rhythm of the breath. Ebb, flow, in, out. Allowing your body to be gently rocked and caressed. Internally caressed by the breath. And if you like, even giving yourself over to your breathing. Let your breathing be all there is. Become the breath. Just breathing. Being breathing. And now gently releasing the breath and just sitting quietly in your own experience and allowing yourself to feel whatever you're feeling and to be just as you are. Now, slowly and very gently, opening your eyes a little and a little. And just being there in the experience. So, are we going to, let's begin to, we can slowly get up, so, should we turn the lights on? Okay, good, perfect. All right, so that should, I think this covers it.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot other, but I think that's the basic overview, and then, so we can stop here, and then if you have questions.
We'll answer some questions during the period.